Reign over England. June 22, 1944. RAF Buttonwood, Lancashire, England. Rain needles the tin roof of the operations shack and runs in crooked lines down the perspex canopy of the cockpit. The air smells of oil, wet canvas, and scorched metal that has not yet cooled. The field is a churn of mud and boot prints, tire ruts filling with brown water as the storm presses down harder. Engines cough, sputter, then fall silent one by one. No one is celebrating the weather today. Captain Eleanor Hale sits alone in the left seat of a battered P-47 Thunderbolt, her gloved hands resting lightly on the controls as if the aircraft might spook if she grips too hard. The altimeter needle trembles. The wind rocks the wings with small, impatient shoves. Water creeps along the canopy frame and drips onto her knee. She does not wipe it away. Eleanor is not supposed to be here. At least, not according to most of the men watching from the edge of the dispersal area. She is not supposed to be trusted with a combat aircraft that has already taken damage. She is not supposed to be the one who decides whether these machines make it home or disappear into cloud and sea. She is a ferry pilot, an auxiliary, a woman. But the order came down anyway. A formation of aircraft returning from the continent has limped back across the channel, riddled with flak, radios knocked out, instruments unreliable, fuel lines leaking. The combat pilots who brought them this far are exhausted, some injured, some shaking too badly to climb back into a cockpit. Someone still has to move the planes. Someone still has to bring them home. Eleanor adjusts the strap of her parachute harness and leans forward, peering through the rain at the runway lights blurring into halos. Her flight jacket is stiff with old moisture, the sheepskin collar darkened from weeks of English weather. On her sleeve, the wasp patch is dulled from use, the wings sewn on by hand months ago in Texas. She remembers the heat of Avenger Field, the dust, the endless drills. She remembers being told again and again that this work mattered, even if no one would ever write it down properly. A crew chief jogs up, head down against the rain, and gives her a thumbs up. The Thunderbolt's engine has been patched just enough. The hydraulic pressure is marginal. The compass swings wide before settling. The radio crackles and goes dead again. Across the field, other women are climbing into other aircraft. A B-26 Marauder with a dented nose. A Mustang with a patched wing panel. A training Harvard that smells like burned insulation. Each cockpit closes with a dull clack, sealing them inside with their thoughts and the rain. The tower's light blinks. The signal to taxi. Eleanor pushes the throttle forward gently. The engine responds with a growl that vibrates up through the seat and into her spine. The aircraft rolls, tires sloshing through standing water. Visibility shrinks to a narrow tunnel of gray. She keeps her eyes moving, checking oil pressure, manifold pressure, the erratic flick of the fuel gauge. She listens to the engine like a doctor listens to a heartbeat, noting every hesitation. As she lines up on the runway, a gust shoves the tail and she corrects without thinking. This is not bravery. It is habit. Training layered over fear until the fear becomes manageable, boxed in by procedure and focus. The takeoff is heavy. The Thunderbolt resists, water spraying up behind as the airspeed creeps higher. For a moment, it feels like the aircraft will refuse her, will stay glued to the soaked earth. Then the wings bite, the wheels leave the ground, and England drops away into cloud. Inside the storm, the world reduces itself to instruments and sound. Rain hammers the canopy. Turbulence jostles her shoulders. The compass wobbles. The artificial horizon steadies her when her body lies. She holds altitude by feel, by memory, by the quiet confidence that comes from hundreds of hours alone in the air. She thinks of the others, scattered across the sky in damaged machines, each woman flying her own narrow corridor through the weather. No formation, no radio chatter. Just trust that everyone knows the plan, that everyone will keep going. On the ground, expectations are low. Losses are assumed. Someone in the briefing room has already penciled question marks next to tail numbers. Eleanor does not know that yet. She only knows the rain, the engine, and the thin line of heading that will take her home if she holds it long enough. Into the blind corridor. The cloud thickens until it feels solid, a gray wall pressing against the canopy. Eleanor trims the aircraft and eases back on the yoke, holding altitude by inches. The artificial horizon glows pale green. The needle shivers. She trusts it anyway. Outside, there is nothing to see. Inside, the engine's note wavers, a slight hitch that makes her jaw tighten. She reaches down and switches fuel tanks, counting the seconds in her head. 1, 2, 3. The engine catches and smooths out. She exhales through her nose and keeps going. The plan is simple on paper. Fly east to the channel, turn south at a fixed heading, then west again toward the reception field. Simple plans survive only if the weather allows them to. Today, the weather has other ideas. A downdraft drops the Thunderbolt hard enough to lift her stomach. She counters with rudder and power, careful not to stress the patched wing. The airframe groans. Rain streaks backward like thrown gravel. Somewhere to her left, another pilot is fighting her own battle with the sky, but Eleanor cannot see her and cannot call her. The radio remains a dead weight. She thinks briefly of Captain James Rowley, the combat pilot who had handed her the aircraft an hour earlier. His face was gray with fatigue, his hands still trembling as he climbed down the ladder. He had looked at her wings, then at her face, and hesitated. Then he had nodded and said, "Bring her back if you can. Not please. Not good luck. Just the truth." The truth is that no one expects perfection today. They expect losses. They expect 1 or 2 planes to vanish into the channel, swallowed by cloud and water without witnesses. They expect a phone call, a line in a logbook, a name quietly crossed out. Eleanor adjusts her seat and leans closer to the panel. The compass drifts again. She taps it once, gently, as if persuasion might help. It does not. She cross-checks with the clock and airspeed, calculating wind drift in her head. She has done this before in training, over empty deserts and calm skies. Doing it now, in weather like this, with an aircraft already wounded, feels different. Every correction carries consequence. Minutes stretch. The storm does not let up. Ice begins to feather along the edges of the canopy. She turns on the de-icing system and watches the buildup slow, then stop. Good enough, she tells herself. Good enough is all there is. A break opens suddenly in the cloud, a ragged tier that shows slate-gray water far below. The channel, waves stippled with whitecaps, moving fast under the wind. Eleanor marks the site in her mind and corrects her heading. She will not get another chance like that soon. The Thunderbolt shudders again, harder this time. An alarm flickers. Oil pressure dips, then recovers. Her heart thumps once, heavy. She does not speak. Speaking would make the fear real. She thinks of Avenger Field again, of instructors drilling emergency procedures until they became reflex. Engine out. Fire. Partial instruments. She thinks of the long ferry flights across America, the loneliness of them, the way confidence grew quietly with each successful landing. No one had promised glory. They had promised responsibility. Another gust slams the aircraft sideways. Eleanor corrects, sweat cold at the base of her neck despite the chill. Her gloves are damp now, slick on the controls. She tightens her grip just enough. Time loses shape. There is only the next correction, the next instrument scan, the next decision. She counts fuel again. She calculates range. She considers alternate fields, though she knows they may be closed by weather as well. Landing short is better than not landing at all. At last, faint and uncertain, a line appears ahead, darker than the cloud around it. The English coast, or a trick of light. She watches it grow, resolve into fields and hedgerows blurred by rain. Relief comes, but she does not let it settle yet. Getting back over land is only half the fight. The descent is rough. Low cloud forces her down sooner than planned. Visibility improves by degrees, enough to make out a river, then a road, then the familiar geometry of an airfield barely visible through sheets of rain. She lines up by instinct more than sight, trusting her sense of alignment. The runway rushes up. The landing is hard but controlled. Tires screech, water spraying as the Thunderbolt slows and turns off into the mud. Eleanor brings the engine to idle and lets it run, listening for trouble. It holds. She taxis clear and shuts down. The sudden silence rings in her ears. As she climbs down, rain soaking her jacket anew, she looks back at the aircraft and lays a hand on the cowling. One down, she thinks. Somewhere out there, others are still fighting their way in. Counting the sky, Eleanor walks toward the edge of the hard stand, boots sinking into wet gravel, rain flattening her hair against her temples. She does not head for the briefing room or the mess. She stops where she can see the approach path, where the sky opens just enough to show incoming aircraft if they are there to be seen. A ground controller runs past, clipboard tucked under his arm, calling out a tail number to no one in particular. A truck idles nearby, its engine rumbling, ready for a fire that everyone hopes will not happen. The smell of wet grass mixes with exhaust and hot oil. The first aircraft appears out of the cloud without warning. A Mustang, wingtip scarred, landing gear coming down unevenly. It drops fast, then steadies, touching down in a plume of spray. The pilot keeps it straight, brings it to a stop. The canopy slides back. A woman climbs out, her face pale but set, eyes already scanning the sky again. 1. Eleanor exhales slowly. She does not smile. She knows better than to count too soon. Another shape emerges, larger this time. The B-26 Marauder, its approach wide and cautious. One engine runs rough, coughing smoke that smears into the rain. The crew on the ground spreads out instinctively. The Marauder lands long, bouncing once, twice, then settling. It rolls to a stop amid shouted instructions and waving arms. 2. A Harvard comes next, its yellow training paint dulled to gray by weather and grime. Then another Thunderbolt. Then a second Mustang. Each arrival brings a ripple of movement across the field, men and women running, counting, checking tail numbers against lists already softening in the rain. Eleanor stays where she is. She watches the cloud bank as if it might answer her stare. She thinks of the others by name now. Lieutenant Rose Calder in the patched Mustang. Flight Officer Miriam Levy in the Harvard. Captain and Whitaker in the Marauder. Faces and voices she knows well enough to imagine their hands on throttles, their eyes flicking between instruments. Time stretches again, but differently now. The tension has shifted from survival to uncertainty. Every minute without an arrival sharpens it. A sudden gust tears a hole in the cloud, and another aircraft drops through. Too fast, too steep. For a heartbeat, it looks wrong, like it will end badly. Then the pilot corrects, flares, and lands clean. The aircraft skids slightly, then straightens. 4. Someone laughs once, sharp and surprised, then stops. No one wants to jinx anything. The rain eases to a steady fall. Visibility improves just enough to tease hope. Eleanor rubs her hands together for warmth and keeps watching. She notices that her legs are trembling now that she is no longer flying. She plants her feet wider and stills them. Another aircraft appears, then another. Each arrival feels heavier than the last, the accumulated weight of what might have been lost lifting a little more each time. The ground crew shouts numbers. The clipboard fills. 7, 8, 9. The list says there should be 10. The last one is the Marauder flown by, and Whitaker. Eleanor knows the aircraft took a flak hit near the wing route. She knows the fuel situation was uncertain. She knows and had laughed it off at the briefing, making a joke about English weather being worse than German guns. Eleanor remembers the sound of that laugh, a little too loud. Minutes pass. The sky closes again, cloud thickening as if offended by the brief clarity. The approach path is empty. Someone near the tower murmurs that it may be time to call it. The controller looks at his watch. Another shakes his head. No one gives an order. They all keep looking up. Eleanor feels something cold settle in her chest. She imagines the channel again, gray and endless, swallowing sound. She imagines a logbook entry written later, neat and final. Then, faint at first, a sound threads through the ring. An engine. Not steady, not strong, but there. Every head lifts. The Marauder breaks through low, dangerously low, wheels already down, flaps uneven. One engine is feathered. The other strains, the prop biting at the air. The aircraft wobbles, then steadies just enough to line up. The landing is brutal. The Marauder slams onto the runway, bounces hard, slews sideways, then straightens as the pilot wrestles it under control. Sparks fly from a scraping nacelle. The ground crew runs alongside as it rolls to a stop. The engine dies. For a moment, there is only rain and breath held tight. Then the cockpit hatch opens, and Whitaker climbs down, one hand gripping the ladder, boots slipping on the wet metal. She reaches the ground and looks up at the aircraft, then around at the field. Her shoulders sag. 10. No one cheers. The sound that rises instead is quieter, heavier. A collective release. Laughter mixed with sobs. Hands clapping backs. Someone wipes their face with a sleeve and pretends it is rain. Eleanor feels her own eyes burn. She blinks hard and looks away, back toward the sky that has finally given them back what it tried to take. They all came back. After the engines stop, the airfield does not erupt into celebration. It exhales. Engines wind down across the hard stands, propellers ticking as they cool. The rain settles into a light mist, as if the storm itself has decided its work is finished. Crews move with practiced efficiency, chalking wheels, draping tarps, guiding exhausted pilots toward warmth and coffee. The war does not pause, but for this narrow slice of time, it loosens its grip. Eleanor stands with the others near the dispersal hut, hands wrapped around a dented metal mug that steams faintly in the damp air. Someone has poured coffee strong enough to burn through fatigue. It tastes like smoke and relief. She drinks it anyway. And Whitaker sits on a crate nearby, helmet in her lap, hair plastered to her forehead. Her hands are shaking now that she no longer needs them steady. A mechanic crouches beside her aircraft, already arguing with another about whether the Marauder will ever fly again, and does not listen. She stares at the ground, breathing slow, as if afraid that if she looks up, the sky might remember her. One by one, the women drift together, drawn by gravity more than intention. No speeches, no formal accounting, just proximity. Miriam Levy rubs warmth back into her fingers. Rose Calder laughs softly at something no one quite hears. Someone lights a cigarette and passes it along without asking. Eleanor listens more than she speaks. She hears fragments. An altimeter that froze. A wing that felt loose. A compass that spun like a toy. Each story overlaps, a patchwork of near misses and small decisions that added up to survival. She recognizes her own experience in all of them. A flight officer from operations approaches, clipboard now dry under his arm. He clears his throat and reads off tail numbers, confirming what everyone already knows. All aircraft accounted for. All pilots returned. His voice cracks on the last word. He nods once, sharply, and walks away before anyone can say anything. The women watch him go. They understand the restraint. Official gratitude will not come easily. It rarely does. As the field settles, Eleanor finds herself alone again, drawn back toward her Thunderbolt. The ground crew has finished their checks. A tarp flaps lightly over the nose. She walks around the aircraft slowly, running her hand along the fuselage, feeling the cold metal beneath her glove. The patched wing looks rough, temporary. Good enough, she thinks again. Good enough was enough. She remembers being told that ferry work was safe. Safer than combat. She remembers instructors explaining that statistics were on their side. Today has made a liar of that comfort. Today was not safe. Today was necessary. The sky darkens toward evening. Somewhere beyond the field, guns are firing again. The war has not noticed what happened here. Inside the hut, paperwork waits. Forms to be filled. Logs to be updated. Eleanor knows that the day will be reduced to neat lines of ink. Departure times. Arrival times. Weather noted as poor. No losses. The human cost will not fit cleanly on the page. She sits at a wooden table and begins to write anyway. Her handwriting is careful, precise. She records the thunderbolt's faults, the turbulence, the visibility. She does not write about fear. There is no space for it. Across the room, and Whitaker finishes her own report. She pauses, then adds a note in the margin about the ferry pilot who brought her aircraft back from the edge of the weather earlier that morning. She does not name Eleanor. She does not need to. The note is small, almost invisible, but it is there. When the reports are done, the women disperse. Some head for barracks. Others linger, unwilling to let the day end just yet. Eleanor steps outside one last time. The rain has stopped completely. Low cloud glows faintly with reflected light from the field. She looks up, searching the empty sky out of habit. For the first time since morning, she allows herself to believe it is over. The weight of tomorrow. Night settles in layers, quiet but not peaceful. The airfield lights hum softly, casting long reflections on wet concrete. Somewhere a generator kicks on, then steadies. The day's urgency fades, replaced by a deeper exhaustion that sinks into bone. Eleanor lies on her bunk, boots still on, staring at the ceiling of the barracks. The mattress smells faintly of damp wool and soap. Around her, other women breathe in uneven rhythms, sleep coming in fragments. No one speaks. There is nothing left to say. Her mind replays the flight in pieces. The shudder of turbulence. The flicker of the oil gauge. The moment the coast appeared through cloud. She knows that tomorrow, and many tomorrows after, those moments will soften at the edges. Memory will sand them down until they fit more easily into a story that can be told. Tonight, they are sharp. She turns her head and sees Rose Calder sitting upright on her bunk, writing a letter by the light of a shaded lamp. Rose pauses, then looks up and meets Eleanor's eyes. They share a brief smile, small and tired. It says everything. It says we are still here. Outside, the distant thud of artillery carries on the wind. It is easy to forget, for a moment, that the men who flew those aircraft earlier today will climb into different machines tomorrow and face fire again. The women will keep moving the planes, keep filling the gaps, keep making the system work. Eleanor knows what will not happen. There will be no headline, no ceremony. The story of today will be filed under routine operations, remarkable only in hindsight that no one was lost. The risk will be invisible. She thinks of the young mechanics who watched them land, of the brief look in their eyes when the last marauder touched down. Surprise, respect, something like gratitude. Those looks will fade too, replaced by the next emergency, the next demand. Before sleep claims her, Eleanor makes herself a quiet promise. She will keep flying as long as they let her. She will keep taking the damaged aircraft, the bad weather, the silent radios. Not for recognition, for continuity, for the simple stubborn fact of bringing machines and people back to where they belong. Morning comes early, gray and thin. The rain has moved on, leaving the field slick and shining. Eleanor wakes stiff and sore, pulls on her jacket, and steps outside. Already, engines are being warmed. Already, orders are being posted. She walks toward the operations board and scans the list. New tail numbers, new routes, new weather warnings. The work has not paused to admire itself. As she waits for her assignment, and Whitaker approaches, helmet under her arm. She stops in front of Eleanor, hesitates, then nods once. "You brought us all back," she says quietly. Eleanor shakes her head. "We did," and smiles, a little sadly, and moves on. Eleanor watches her go, then turns back toward the field. Another day, another flight. The sky looks calmer now, almost innocent. She knows better. What history did not write? The aircraft assigned to Eleanor that morning is newer, cleaner, its logbook mercifully thin. She notes it with a flicker of gratitude, then closes the cover and hands it back to the clerk. Outside, the field is already alive with motion, the war's machinery grinding forward without pause or memory. As she walks toward the dispersal area, she passes a group of young pilots fresh from the continent. Their faces are tight, eyes hollowed by lack of sleep. One of them stops when he sees her wings. He hesitates, then removes his cap and nods, awkward and sincere. Eleanor returns the gesture without slowing. The exchange lasts less than a second. It will not be recorded anywhere. By midday, the clouds have lifted just enough to show a pale strip of blue. Eleanor taxis out, lines up, and takes off again, the routine settling around her like a familiar coat. The sky accepts her this time without protest. England falls away beneath the wings, neat and orderly from above, betraying nothing of yesterday's danger. As the aircraft hums along, Eleanor thinks of how the day before will be remembered, or not remembered. There will be no photograph of rain streaking across a canopy, no caption naming the women who sat alone in damaged machines and chose to keep flying. The official histories will speak of tonnage moved, sorties flown, air superiority gained. They will not pause on the fact that 10 aircraft returned when expectations said otherwise. She is not bitter about it. Bitterness would be too heavy to carry aloft. Instead, there is a quieter satisfaction, the kind that settles deep and steady, like trim set just right. The knowledge that when the weather closed in and the odds leaned toward loss, someone was there to hold the line anyway. Hours later, Eleanor lands, shuts down, and climbs out into another field, another routine. A mechanic asks her about the engine. She answers. Another ferry assignment is already being discussed nearby. The cycle continues. Years from now, the war will end. The airfields will empty. The logbooks will be boxed and shelved. Eleanor Hale will return to a world that does not quite know what to do with what she has been. She will carry the memories quietly, like many of the women who flew before and beside her. And somewhere, buried in reports and faded ink, will be a single unremarkable day marked with an unremarkable note. All aircraft returned. That line will never explain the rain, the fear, the damaged wings, or the woman in the cockpit who refused to turn back. But it will be true.